Hello, this is Matt Singer. I'm the Arts and Culture Editor at Willamette Week, and my guest for Distant Voices today is Katie Nguyen. She's a local comedian and high school teacher. Katie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. So, a lot of these we've been asking people sort of how has quarantine been going, which seems like a weird question to ask now that we're like 6 or 7 months or whatever into this. So maybe I'll kind of ask it like, how is this? Where are you, I guess, in the stage of quarantine? Is this like has it become just sort of like have you eased into it, or is it still uh, crazy making time? I guess.
It um it has been rough because the things that I spend the most of my time doing typically are very social things at school or at shows, and both of those have been um I mean they're still ongoing in some way, but there's that feeling of disconnect, not being there in person. So I think for a while I was just in denial, I guess, and didn't really, I was on summer break, so it was like kind of similar-ish. I just didn't have shows, but I did a lot of online stuff. But right now, as a teacher, being at the beginning of the school year, I feel a very urgent need to adapt, and I'm kind of in this mode where I'm like, well, we got to figure out how to do this online now. We got to figure out how to do this. There's a lot of different things um, that I've never had to do, in these media before, and it's just been really difficult, but like I feel a very urgent need to do a good job at it, because I know that also students are suffering and families are suffering. Literally everybody is like, we're all trying to hold each other up right now. Real big team effort. So I just feel kind of like I'm in like kick it into gear mode right now. A lot of teachers are.
Well, where and what do you teach?
So I teach Spanish language arts and Spanish up at a high school in St. John's, Roosevelt High School. So Spanish is a world language, and also Spanish language arts. Other people call it immersion. We have a lot of native speakers, so basically it's like an English class, but in Spanish. So we read books and articles and poems, and we write short stories and essays and Socratic seminars, that kind of stuff, all in Spanish, which is pretty fun.
How has it so far? What have been like the major like differences or changes, if you can even like narrow that down to doing a virtual class versus an in-person class?
Well, what's really well, in order to honor and accommodate students' lives outside of schools, their family needs, their work, just everything that they have to take care of outside of school. We're just trying to be really accommodating, which means that we have synchronous curriculum, live classes, and asynchronous. And that's really challenging sometimes because we just can't provide the maximum amount of support. Usually I'm in that building, at least, 8 hours a day, every single day. They know where to find me. They know exactly where my room is. Now the schedules are really confusing. They have, live classes and asynchronous time. And on Wednesdays, the schedule is different. And it's, they can email us, but it's just not the same. And also, not seeing us face to face. It's just harder to communicate. It's harder to get information across when it's on a screen. Just you'll have a harder time paying attention to that for a multitude of reasons. So it's, you feel like slightly disconnected, and then you just feel like time-wise, everybody, like it's harder to just make contact with people as it is now.
How have you sort of personally tried to adjust either your curriculum or your like teaching style to having to do it through a screen?
So what most schools are doing across the country, we're adding curriculum that is based in socio-emotional learning. So community building stuff, getting to know you stuff, trying to feel comfortable with each other on a screen. PPS, Portland Public Schools, had a soft start. So we didn't start delivering academic curriculum until like a week and a half after we first made contact with students, and they started following their schedules. And that was all socio-emotional stuff. That was all, like people had activities about like mental mapping. People had activities about like community self-care. People had like a lot of different kinds of lesson plans and activities and games and stuff to help students feel a little bit connected before we got into like learning and trying to, socio-emotional learning is learning, but before we got into like hard academic content and standards, and assessments and that kind of thing. So we're trying to incorporate that kind of learning in every single class. That's a big change in the curriculum. Always we like community building stuff, but there's more emphasis on it now.
Let me ask about comedy then. So you said you've been, kind of filling the void a bit by doing stuff online, but how much do you miss the actual, act of getting up on a stage and doing stand up? You know, we've asked comedians that question, and we've gotten actually different responses. But for you, how much are you missing stand up at this point?
I mean, I miss it a lot. I mean, if you're talking, I mean, a lot of comedians, and I'll agree, a huge part of what we miss is socializing with our friends, because a lot of our friends we only saw. But if we're speaking specific about being on stage, I do miss that feeling. So, like, the way I think about it, like, anytime you tell a joke and people laugh, like, you made some kind of connection, you know, like, I was able to communicate an idea that I thought maybe you'd find funny, and you did, and that was great, you know, and I got to share that with you. Um, and comedy is really great in that there's actually a lot of comedians who have like social anxiety, I would say, and like would not feel super comfortable talking with an audience member before or after a show. But like when they're on stage, they like feel like confident and they're able to communicate and just really be themselves up there. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's just like a really specific type of social interaction where you just get to share with this big group of people, and there's not that much pressure because you can't see their faces sometimes, and they're sitting far away from you, and like they're not even supposed to, you know, respond necessarily. And when they get a joke, or they really come along with you for a story, or they really like, you know, like pick up on something, it just feels like this really warm connection with the audience, you know, that I was able to share something with you that I thought you might enjoy, and you did. And you're showing me that you enjoyed it by laughing back. So I really miss that specific type of interaction, which like is a way to interact with a lot of people at the same time, and not feel like the pressure of like a one-on-one conversation with a stranger you've never met before.
What do you think will be the long-term effects of COVID on stand-up when it returns? You know, it seems like this is a universal experience, and it's like, can you get away with when things reopen and being a comedian and not commenting on the last? By that point, it'll have probably been a year. Like are we going to see a lot of like you know, homogenous stand-up sets when things return? You think?
I could. I'm sure. I'm sure that will be a very common topic. But also, I mean, whenever something like this happens, comics are also hyper aware of the fact there will be more material about it. Like, it's a cliche, like, oh, we're in election year, you hear a lot of jokes about Trump. That's why, you know, when Trump got elected, people were like, oh, comics are going to love this. And we ended up being like, no, not really, because like Trump jokes are like, yeah, you know. So I think, and people have made a lot of sarcastic jokes about people having like writing COVID jokes. So like already there's that kind of thing in the air about how like, well, if you're gonna do a COVID joke, it better not be like one that literally everybody has thought of. You know, about like, oh, everybody's gonna gain weight or become an alcoholic or both. And it's just like, how many people, you know, have thought of something like that? So I mean, I guess hacky comics, yeah, they'll probably do a lot of really like stereotypical lowest common denominator, just like generic COVID jokes. But there'll probably be some really interesting stuff too, because this has caused a lot of weird stuff for people, a lot of momentous life changes, a lot of, you know, like changes in relationships and, you know, work and jobs and living situations. And so there might be some really, really interesting stuff coming out of it too. We'll see.
What's been either like the weirdest or funniest thing in your own life, either as an observation or just something that's happened that in the last 6 or 7 months that stands out to you?
One thing that I started doing that I never did before was working out. I never worked out before because I had like a relatively active life, like I biked everywhere and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I started working out. I try to work out, like I tried to almost every day, and like I started keeping track of it, and I had like my workout videos like in like a file, and like I recorded the number of minutes, and I realized after a while that I didn't feel any better or any worse. And I had always thought that if I started working out, I'm like, I want to get more energy, I want to feel better, and I'm like, I don't feel any better or any worse. But the difference was, if I didn't work out, I felt like a lazy, you know, like piece of crap. So like I had this like reverse placebo effect where like I physically didn't feel any better or any worse, but like mentally, if I didn't, I'd be like, oh, I didn't work out, I'm such a piece of crap. You know, like this, like, so that I guess was the benefit of it. Now I have like an expectation for myself that I'll do it, but like literally I don't feel any different when I do or I don't. So
right. Yeah, guilt is something though. It's filling some kind of void.
I've been cultivating guilt to work on my self-care. That's how it works, right? We only take care of ourselves when we feel bad.